Welcome again to another podcast. And again, as always, we appreciate you joining us. As I mentioned in our last podcast, we're going to continue with a little bit of a political theme today. We're going to discuss materials that are found in Alma chapters 5 through 12. Alma's chapters 5 through 12 of the Book of Mormon. And we're going to talk a little bit specifically about lawyers. And in particular the lawyers at the time of Alma as well as that of Christ. But first I want to get materialistic with you just a little bit and lay out for you the reckoning of money as established by King Messiah. It's a little bit confusing, but I thought this chart might help just a tad. So in Alma's chapter 11, verses 5 through 19, we have this monetary system laid out. First of all, you got the gold section, the greater values. You got a C9 of gold, you got a senon of gold, you got a shum of gold, and you got a limna of gold. And then you got a senum of silver, an amner of silver, an isram of silver, and lastly, an onti of silver. And then you get some of the values involved here. You got a sunum of silver is equal to a C9 of gold. You can see those two where it says are equal. And then you got a sunum of gold equals 2 C9s. And then a shum of gold equals 2 sunums. And then a limna of gold is equal to a shum plus a sionon plus a sunum, all three. Now, the silver. You got an amner of silver equals 2 sunum of silver. Okay. Then you got an isram of silver is equal to 4 sunums. And then an onti is equal to a sunum plus an amner plus an isram. And then you got the lesser values down here at the bottom. You have a shiblon is equal to 1/2 of a senon. So you're moving to the lower and the higher. So again, a shiblon equals 1/2 of a senum. And then a shiblum equals 1/2 of a shiblon. And then leah equals 1/2 of a shiblum. And then an anti of gold equals 3 shiblums. So that's your monetary system. Now it was for the sole purpose to get gain, because they received their wages according to their employ. Therefore they did stir up the people to rioting and all manner of disturbances and wickedness, that they might have more employ, that they might get more money according to the suits which were brought before them. Therefore they did stir up the people. Alma 11:20. Was Jesus a law-abiding citizen? Well, during his life, Jesus experienced 3 different structures of government organized at the expense of the common good of the majority. Upon the death of Herod, this is Herod the Great, his kingdom was divided amongst his 3 sons. Galilee was a monarchy ruled by his son Herod Antipas. Now, after the removal of his brother Herod Archelaus by Rome in 6 CE, Judah was then ruled directly by a Roman procurator, who reported to the governor of Syria. However, the day-to-day operations were entrusted to a wealthy oligarchy. Now, an oligarchy is a ruling few, in this case, the Sanhedrins, sometimes referred to in the Gospels as the chief priest and elders. In conquering territories, Rome practiced this concept of putting indigenous people to rule in their behalf. They always chose people from the wealthy class who saw it perhaps in their best interest to support Rome, the Sadducees. On top of these structures was a third government. It was an emperor of Rome, first Augustus and then Tiberius. These were essentially self-appointed dictators. Jesus was confronted by then a monarchy in Galilee, an oligarchy in Jerusalem, and then a dictatorship, of course, in Rome. So the Savior's trying to juggle, 3 balls at one time, and there were obviously overlapping legal systems in place during the course of all of this. But the one overruling set of laws, perhaps, with regards to the Jews, and in particular with with Jesus is that found in Hebrew law, or what is found in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Now, at the time of Jesus, there were 3 levels of Hebrew law. At the core of Hebrew law was the 10 Commandments. However, surrounding those were 613 laws found in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, and these laws are referred to as the mitzvot. The third level of Hebrew law is the debated law. It's the oral law, the interpretive law. Now, the oral law was developed by the rabbis and Pharisees, and they viewed it as creating a fence, perhaps, around the law to keep the precepts from being violated. Now, Jesus frequently broke religious law as it interpreted by the Pharisees' oral law. They accused him of violating the Sabbath by picking grain and performing miracles on the Sabbath, or Shabbat, as it might have been called then. He openly violated what religious leaders termed keeping the Sabbath day holy. Jesus ate with sinners. He challenged the law of kosher food. And his disciples, they did not do the ritual washing of their hands prior to eating. Jesus prioritized the 10 Commandments over the 613 mitzvot and the oral law, the 10 Commandments. He actually even went beyond the 10 Commandments and questioned the motives behind the thou shalt not. For example, thou shalt not kill. Jesus claimed that anger and insult were wrong. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Jesus claimed that lust was wrong. Thou shalt not swear. Jesus claimed that taking an oath of any sort was wrong. And rather than hating our enemies, we must love and pray for them. Well, much of the criticism that Jesus received was again leveled at him by lawyers and scribes. Jesus said, "Woe to you lawyers," a stern warning against those self-appointed experts of his words. In Luke chapter 11, verses 45 through 47 and 52 through 54, we find these 3 woes, the 3 woes as I call it. Then answered one of the lawyers and said unto him, Master, thus sayest thou, reproachest us also? And he said, Woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. Woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye entered not in yourself, and them that were entering in ye hindered. And as he said these things unto them, the scribes and Pharisees began to urge him vehemently, and to provoke him to speak of many things, laying wait for him, to seek to catch him, something out of his mouth that might accuse him. So these lawyers and scribes of the law were thought again to be the experts. The rebuke that Jesus gave them came, as you can see, in 3 forms. Now, before we get into a discussion about these 3 woes, there were Old Testament lawyers that were good, scribes of the law. Ezra, for example, skilled scribe in the law of Moses. In Ezra 7:11, for Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord, and to do it, and to teach in Israel statutes and judgments. Now, this is much different than what Jesus found during his day, and what we find in our day as well. In Luke 11:46, Jesus pronounced the first woe. And he said, Woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens, grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. These men would persuade others to do what they felt was the truth. Yet they were not prophets or called of God. They were self-appointed. Likewise, today, we need to be constantly vigilant to those that feel they are the guardians of truth. In Luke 11:47, Jesus pronounced a second woe, and he laid out the charges against these men. Woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers kill them. These lawyers were like their fathers. The irony is that they would later accuse Jesus and have him silenced and eventually killed, just as the fathers did the prophets of old. In Luke 11:52, Jesus pronounced the last of the three woes. Woe unto you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye entered not in yourself, and them that were entering in ye hindered. Well, Jesus was preparing his disciples to take on leadership roles in his new church. It would not be long before the apostles would eventually go out and create churches and appoint elders in these churches. Jesus warned them to know, and us as well, to be aware of the sorts of men that would cause disharmony and problems, just as Jesus and Alma and Amulek witnessed. When they begin to badger, when they begin to critique the teachings, when they begin to round people up, when they begin to whisper, when they begin to plot, then they know that they have a viper in their midst. Christ's technique of dealing with such men was similar to that of Alma and Amulek. This is kind of a lengthy couple of verses, but it's worth laying the foundation of what I want to stress and talk about for the balance of our podcast. Nevertheless, there were some among them who thought to question them, that by their cunning devices they might catch them in their words, that they might find witness against them, that they might deliver them to their judges, that they might be judged according to the law, that they might be slain or cast into prison according to the crime which they could make appear or witness against them. Now it was those men who sought to destroy them, who were lawyers, who were hired or appointed by the people to administer the law at their times of trial, or at the trials of the crimes of the people before the judges. Now these lawyers were learned in all the art and cunning of the people, and this was to enable them that they might be skillful in their profession. And it came to pass that they began to question Amulek, that thereby they might make him cross his words, or contradict the words which he should speak. Now they knew not that Amulek could know of their designs, but it came to pass as they began to question him, he perceived their thoughts. This is just as Christ could do. And he said unto them, O ye wicked and perverse generation, ye lawyers and hypocrites, for ye are laying the foundation of the devil, for ye are laying traps and snares to catch the holy ones of God. Ye are laying plans to pervert the ways of righteousness, to bring down the wrath of God upon your head, even to the utter destruction of this people, which would eventually happen. Now I'd like to share with you 9 scriptural examples taken from the New Testament of how Christ avoided the entrapment of the lawyers, typically by answering a question with a question. All right, our first one. Matthew 15, verses 1 through 3. Then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, Why do the disciples transgress the traditions of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandments of God by your traditions? Mark 2, 3 through 9. When Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there, and reasoning in their hearts, Why doth this man speak blasphemies? And immediately, when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they also reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason these things in your hearts? Whether it easier to say to the sick of palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or say, Arise, and take up thy bed and walk. Mark 10, 2 and 3. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? Tempting him. And he answered and said unto them, What did Moses command you? Mark 12, 14 through 17. And when they were come, they said unto him, Master, we know that thou art true, and carest for no man, for thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Shall we give, or shall we not give? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why temptest ye me? Bring me a penny, that I may see it. And they brought it. And he said unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? And they answered and said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Luke 6, 1 through 3. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first, that he went through the cornfield, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn, and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And certain of the Pharisees said unto them, Why do ye do that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Have ye not read so much as this, what David did when himself was hungered, and they that were with him? Luke 10, 25 and 26. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up, and tempting him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? Luke 20, 1 through 4. And it came to pass that on one of those days, as he taught the people in the temple and preached the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes came upon him with the elders, and spake unto him, saying, Tell us, by what authority doest thou these things? Or who is he that gave thee this authority? And he answered and said unto them, I will also ask you one thing, and answereth me. And baptism of John, was it from heaven or of men? John 8. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery. Now Moses in the law commandeth us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? Well, he lifted himself up and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Where are those thine accusers? John 18, 22 and 23. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? And Jesus answered and said, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? Well, let me conclude today's podcast by simply stating that Jesus reduced the entire law, into two simple love commandments. Matthew 22. Jesus saith unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Of these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. I believe what Jesus is saying to us is that if there's ever a difference, always choose love over law. I want to thank you for joining our podcast today. I hope our discussion about the lawyers that faced Christ, Alma, and Amulek was enlightening and informative. Join me next time if you would. We'll be discussing Alma's chapter 13 through 22, or weeks 26 and 27. Thanks again for joining me. Look forward to seeing you next time.